These sorts of books are very important for a number of reasons. It's important for us to know our position on things, to have an idea of what the position of others is on those things, and to consider the evidences of those positions. Because this arguing, well, my book says this and my book says that, and it's not necessarily even going to totally work on people of the same path. If there's more available, why aren't people answering from some of that? Mark and Matthew and Luke, well, what's at the end there and what's right there is more doctrine than anything real. Why? The books of the Bible had their first versions by 150. The book of Revelation and the Gospel of John were the first, but those were based on older texts. The book of Revelation, one of the characters that made their way into the Jesus story. In general, I've talked about the four individuals into the Christian idea of Jesus version of the story, but it's clear that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John did not know Jesus. And John being rewritten about something about Bacchus is also something to point out too. It's like people talk about the earliest Bible. It's like you look back to the life of Muhammad. There are manuscripts that to the letter, we know there haven't been any changes. It's important to accept and reject things based on evidences. Changes, errors in transmission, the fact that some things are representative rather than, revealed or inspired, and perhaps different ideas of inspired. Inspired is not just you get an idea and then you compose something. That's not the spiritual meaning of it. Over time in English and stuff, we've started saying that, but it's supposed to have a different sense to it. We don't blame the actual prophets. We believe in the actual prophets. And regardless of what people's path is, we agree with them as far as it's good and true. Whether it's by commentary or comment, we need to be very honest about both actual scripture of God and that which is attributed to being God's path. Christian scholars will admit that no original text of any of the 66 books of the Bible, or whichever version of the Bible that you have, exists. The New Testament, as far as Jesus as the prophet, Messiah, Emmanuel, Christ, would have been considered, well, you don't have anything that could be considered original language, let alone original form. And a lot of the stuff in the Jewish side of the Bible, well, that was based on stuff in not only earlier dialects, but earlier languages as well. It's apparent that certain versions of Babylonian and Akkadian and other sorts of Mesopotamian myths and stuff from ancient Egypt and stuff was given a version. Every nation is supposed to follow the law of its scripture. Christians don't really believe Jesus is a Messiah, that he is an Emmanuel, that he is a Christ, because all those names would indicate that this figure is not a deity, not part deity. It's right there in the thing. You even have Jesus called Lucifer in some parts of the Bible. Now, I don't know if this brings that up. The Gospels and the writings of Paul and his buddies seem very clearly as if they didn't have the whole story. Some things were changed for theological reasons. It is apparent that the people composing the Bible and, particularly the Christian side, had some beliefs that were obviously different than those prophets. And you had professional priests composing things, not just devotees and disciplic discession. You had people who made money off religion deciding which books were going to be included, what versions of them were going to be included. And when it comes to the New Testament, you hear just how many variations there were and how many contradictions. It's like there's more contradiction and well, not quite. There actually is more other text than there is contradiction and variance, but, we're pretty close, right? Certainly we can do better than the Latin Bible, or we can do better than some of the English versions, which obviously leave things out or put something in and change the sense of the language. But to say that earlier versions of text were superstitious and yet the current ones aren't, and it's like it's basically the same text, but people have issues with the authorities, and it's like if you find problems with the Catholic Church, you're obviously going to find problems with the Bible, because the Catholics were the one who decided the Bible we have. We don't really know who wrote some of the texts. We see certain prophecies about Muhammad and such being ignored. The people who thoroughly read the Bible are more likely to leave it. The people who read of Quran are more likely to accept it. Ethically, morally, and in other ways, there's just some things that, can't be accepted in different portions about the Bible, even if you ignore the variants and the contradictions. Now, and not all these are what you'd call absurdities either. Now, as far as what the Bible represents, certainly the Quran has a more exalted and a purer idea of prophets and God than the Bible does. And it has a more respectful and balanced in terms of race and gender and all that view of humanity. And science and philosophy and all that is accepted. Not necessarily everything scientists and all that do.